The sun hung low over the Utah Territory horizon of 1872, casting long shadows across the dusty trail where Willow Crawford found herself bound to the spokes of a stagecoach wheel, her wedding dress torn and stained with the red soil of the frontier. The rope cut into her wrists, and the tears that streamed down her face had long since dried in the unforgiving heat. She had stopped screaming hours ago, her throat raw, her hope fading with the daylight. The thundering of hooves broke the silence of the desert evening. A solitary rider approached, silhouetted against the amber sky. Isaac Owens pulled his horse to a stop, dust swirling around him as he surveyed the abandoned stagecoach. His eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his worn leather hat when he spotted the woman tied to the wheel. "Dear God," he muttered, swinging down from his saddle. His spurs jangled as his boots hit the ground. He approached cautiously, one hand on the revolver at his hip. Willow flinched as the stranger drew near. Her wedding day had turned into a nightmare when the stagecoach had been ambushed. The bandits had taken everything, the other passengers, the strongbox, her new husband. They had left her behind, a cruel joke tied to the wheel of the abandoned coach. "I'm not going to hurt you, madam," the man said, his voice gentle as he knelt beside her. He pulled a knife from his boot and began sawing at the ropes. "Name's Isaac Owens. Most folks call me Ike. Please," Willow whispered, her voice barely audible. "They took everything." "Don't you worry about that now," Ike said as the last of the ropes fell away. He caught her as she slumped forward, her limbs numb from hours of restricted circulation. "Can you tell me your name?" "Willow," she managed, wincing as feeling returned to her extremities. "Willow Crawford." Ike nodded, helping her to her feet. She stumbled, and he caught her with strong arms. Without hesitation, he lifted her and carried her to his horse. "Where are you taking me?" Willow asked, fear edging back into her voice. "My ranch is about 3 miles from here," Ike explained as he placed her carefully in his saddle. "You need food, water, and rest. Then we can figure out what happened and what to do next." He swung up behind her, one arm securely around her waist as he took the reins. "Hang on, Miss Crawford, you're safe now." As they rode away from the abandoned stagecoach, Willow leaned back against the stranger's chest, too exhausted to resist. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid presence of the cowboy behind her lulled her into a state between wakefulness and sleep. "My husband," she murmured. "They took William." Ike's arm tightened slightly around her. "We'll find him," he promised, though his tone held a note of reservation that Willow was too tired to notice. The sun had fully set by the time they reached Ike's ranch. It was a modest spread, a small cabin with a barn and corral nearby. A few cattle could be seen grazing in the distance, silhouettes against the darkening landscape. "Home sweet home," Ike said as he guided his horse to the hitching post in front of the cabin. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Willow down. Her legs buckled as soon as her feet touched the ground, and Ike caught her, lifting her once again. "I've got you," he assured her as he carried her to the cabin door. He managed to push it open with his foot, then carried her inside and gently laid her on a simple bed in the corner of the main room. Willow's eyes fluttered open, taking in the rustic interior, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a small cookstove, shelves lined with books, and a few personal items. It was simple but clean and orderly. "Rest here," Ike said, moving to light a lamp. "I'll get you some water." Willow watched as he moved about the cabin, filling a cup from a pitcher. She accepted it gratefully when he returned to her side, drinking deeply. "Thank you," she said when she drained the cup. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Ike's expression darkened. "Not many folks use that trail anymore. I was tracking a stray when I spotted the coach." He took the empty cup from her. "Are you hungry?" Willow nodded, suddenly aware of the hollow feeling in her stomach. It had been hours since she'd eaten anything. While Ike prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Willow struggled to sit up, taking stock of her condition. Her once beautiful wedding dress was ruined, torn and dirty from her ordeal. Her wrists were raw from the ropes, and her fair skin was reddened from the sun. But she was alive, and for that she was grateful. "You said they took your husband?" Ike asked as he placed a plate in front of her. Willow nodded, picking up the spoon with trembling fingers. We were married this morning in Cedar City. We were on our way to his ranch near Grand Junction when the stagecoach was attacked. Her voice broke. There were 3 other passengers and the driver. The bandits took them all, along with the strongbox. They left me behind, tied to the wheel like some kind of cruel joke. Ike's jaw tightened. Do you know who they were? Could you identify them? They wore bandanas over their faces, Willow said, shaking her head, but their leader. He had a scar across his right eye, and he knew William by name. Ike frowned. Your husband knew these men? I don't know, Willow admitted. William and I hadn't known each other long. It was an arranged marriage of sorts. My father died last winter, leaving me with substantial debts. William offered to pay them all if I agreed to be his wife. She looked down at her plate, embarrassed by the admission. It wasn't what I had dreamed of, but it seemed like my only option. No judgment here, Ike said softly. We all do what we have to in this world. They ate in silence for a while, Willow too hungry to talk, Ike lost in thought. When she had finished, he took her plate and returned with a damp cloth. For your wrists, he explained, gently taking her hand and dabbing at the raw skin. His touch was surprisingly tender for a man with such calloused hands. Thank you, Willow said, watching his face as he concentrated on his task. He was handsome in a rugged way, with sun-browned skin and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was serious. His dark hair was a bit too long, curling at the nape of his neck beneath his hat, which he had removed upon entering the cabin. We should get you to town tomorrow, Ike said as he finished tending to her wrists. The sheriff will want to hear about this. And maybe we can find out something about your husband and the other passengers. Yes, Willow agreed, though a flicker of uncertainty passed through her. William had been taking her to an isolated ranch away from the town and people she knew. She had been prepared for a life of solitude with a man she barely knew, but now that fate had intervened, she felt a strange sense of relief mingled with her fear and concern. You should get some sleep, Ike said, interrupting her thoughts. You can take the bed, I'll make do by the fire. Willow wanted to protest, but exhaustion was overwhelming her. Thank you, she said again, unable to find other words to express her gratitude. Ike nodded and moved away to prepare his own sleeping area. Willow lay back on the bed, her body aching from the day's ordeal. Despite her worry for William and the others, sleep claimed her almost immediately. Ike watched her for a moment, struck by the contrast between her delicate beauty and the strength she had shown in the face of such adversity. He had seen men break under less strain than what this woman had endured today. Yet here she was, still standing metaphorically, at least. He spread his bedroll near the fire, his mind turning over the details of her story. Something didn't sit right with him. Bandits in these parts typically didn't leave survivors, especially not ones who could identify them. And why separate the woman from the others? It felt personal, not like a simple robbery. As he drifted off to sleep, Ike resolved to get to the bottom of this mystery. Not just for the sake of justice, but for the sake of the woman sleeping across the room, whose quiet dignity in the face of disaster had touched something inside him that he thought had long since hardened. Morning came with the crow of a rooster from the nearby coop. Willow woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up with a gasp. Easy there, Ike said from where he stood by the stove. You're safe. Willow pushed a strand of hair from her face, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. I need to find William, she said, her voice stronger than it had been the day before. And we will, Ike assured her. But first breakfast, then we'll head into town. It's about an hour's ride to Cottonwood Junction. He set a plate of bacon and biscuits before her, along with a cup of strong coffee. Willow ate gratefully, realizing that despite her worry, her body needed sustenance. I have some clothes that might fit you, Ike offered, gesturing to her torn wedding dress. They belong to my sister. She lived with me for a time before she married and moved to California. Willow nodded, grateful for the offer. After breakfast, Ike showed her to a small trunk in the corner of the room and left her alone to change while he went to saddle his horse. The simple dress she found was a bit loose on her slender frame, but it was clean and whole, which was more than could be said for her wedding gown. She folded the ruined white dress carefully, unable to simply discard it despite its condition. It represented a future that might already be lost. When Ike returned, he found her ready, her hair neatly braided, the borrowed dress belted at the waist with a length of ribbon she had salvaged from her wedding attire. "Ready?" he asked, offering her his arm. Willow nodded, taking his arm with a sense of determination. "Yes." "Thank you for all your help, Mr. Owens." "Ike," he corrected her with a small smile. "We've shared a roof. I think that warrants first names." "Ike," she agreed, returning his smile tentatively. The ride to town was mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Willow rode in front of Ike again, his arm secure around her waist. Despite the circumstances, she found herself drawing comfort from his solid presence. Cottonwood Junction was a small but growing town, with a main street lined with businesses: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and at the end, the sheriff's office. People paused in their activities to watch as Ike and Willow rode in, curiosity plain on their faces. Ike helped Willow down from the horse in front of the sheriff's office, then tied the animal to the hitching post. "Sheriff Adams is a good man," he told her as they approached the door. "If anyone can help us find your husband, it's him." The sheriff's office was a simple building with a desk, a few chairs, and 2 cells in the back. Sheriff Jacob Adams looked up from his paperwork as they entered, his weathered face breaking into a smile at the sight of Ike. "Owens, been a while since you graced us with your presence." His smile faded as he took in Willow's appearance and the serious expression on Ike's face. "What's happened?" Ike guided Willow to a chair before the desk. "Sheriff, this is Mrs. Willow Crawford. She was attacked on the Cedar City Road yesterday. Bandits took the Stagecoach along with her husband and the other passengers." Adams's expression turned grim. "Madam, I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me what happened?" Willow recounted her story, her voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. When she mentioned the scar-faced leader who had known William by name, the sheriff exchanged a look with Ike. "Sounds like Tucker Reed," Adams said, his tone grave. "He's been causing trouble in these parts for a couple of years now, but this is bolder than his usual operations." "You know this man?" Willow asked, leaning forward. Adams nodded. "He was a Confederate soldier during the war, came west afterward like many did, started small stealing horses, the occasional stagecoach robbery, but he's been getting more ambitious lately." He paused, looking troubled. "You say he knew your husband by name?" "Yes," Willow confirmed. "He called him Montgomery and said something about finally getting what was coming to him." Ike frowned. "Montgomery, I thought your name was Crawford." "It is," Willow said, confusion evident in her voice. "William's surname is Montgomery, William Montgomery." The sheriff's eyebrows shot up. "William Montgomery, the cattle baron from Colorado Territory." Willow nodded slowly. "Yes, that's him. Do you know him?" Adams leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded. "By reputation. He owns one of the largest spreads in western Colorado." He exchanged another look with Ike before continuing. "Mrs. Montgomery, I need to ask, how well do you know your husband?" "We were only married yesterday," Willow admitted. "Our courtship was brief. My father was his business partner, but when Papa died, the debts were substantial. William offered to clear them all if I would marry him." "I see," Adams said, his tone neutral. "Mrs. Montgomery, I'm not one to speak ill of anyone without cause, but your husband has a certain reputation in these parts, not all of it good." Willow felt a chill run through her. "What do you mean?" "He's been known to use unorthodox methods to expand his holdings," Adams said carefully. "And he's had run-ins with Tucker Reed before. They served together during the war, from what I understand." Willow sat back, stunned. "I didn't know any of this." "Most folks don't air their dirty laundry to prospective brides," Ike said, his voice gentler than his words. "What happens now?" Willow asked, looking from Ike to the sheriff. Adams sighed. "I'll send telegrams to the nearby towns, alert them to be on the lookout for Reed and his gang, and I'll try to gather any information about where they might have taken your husband and the others." He stood up. "In the meantime, you'll need a place to stay." "She can stay with me," Ike said, the offer coming before he had fully thought it through. Both Willow and the sheriff looked at him in surprise. I mean, Ike amended, my ranch is isolated. If Reed or his men come back looking for her, they won't think to look there, and I have the space with my sister gone. Adams nodded slowly. That might be wise, at least until we know more about what we're dealing with. He turned to Willow. Mrs. Montgomery, it's your decision. The hotel is an option, but Ike's right, his place would be safer. Willow looked at Ike, studying his face. There was no guile there, only genuine concern. I think I would feel safer at Mr. Owens's ranch, she said finally. Good, Adams said. I'll send word as soon as I have any information. As they left the sheriff's office, Ike suggested they visit the general store to get Willow some necessities. We don't know how long this will take, he explained. You'll need more than one dress. Willow agreed, though she felt strange shopping for clothes while her husband was missing. The proprietor of the general store, Mrs. Ellis, was a kind woman who quickly sized up the situation, or at least part of it, and helped Willow select a few simple dresses, undergarments, and toiletries. You poor dear, Mrs. Ellis clucked as she wrapped their purchases. Lost everything in a stagecoach robbery, did you? Well, you're in good hands with Ike Owens, one of the finest men in the territory, though he keeps to himself these days. Ike, who had been examining a new bridle while the women shopped, looked embarrassed at the praise. Just doing what anyone would, Mrs. Ellis. Nonsense, the older woman said firmly. Not everyone would take in a stranger in need. She turned back to Willow. And if you need anything else, anything at all, you just let me know. As they rode back to Ike's ranch, Willow found herself wondering about her rescuer. Mrs. Ellis seems to think highly of you, she commented. Ike shrugged, the movement shifting his arm where it rested around her waist. She's kind to everyone. She said you keep to yourself these days, Willow pressed gently. Has it always been that way? Ike was silent for a long moment. No, he finally said. I came west after the war like many did, started ranching about 5 years ago. My sister joined me a year later after her fiancé died of typhoid. For a while it was good, we were building something. Then Sarah met Daniel Wilson, fell in love and moved to California with him last year. He paused. It's been quiet since then. You miss her, Willow observed. She was all the family I had left, Ike said simply, but she's happy, and that's what matters. They rode in silence for a while, each contemplating the strange circumstances that had brought them together. Willow found herself wondering what kind of man her husband truly was and whether she would ever see him again. The thought should have filled her with dread, but instead she felt an odd sense of ambivalence. What was he like? Ike asked suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. William. Willow considered the question. Confident, charming when he wanted to be, he always seemed to know exactly what he wanted and how to get it, she sighed. I admired that about him, I suppose. After my father died, I felt so lost, so uncertain about everything. And now, Ike asked. Willow stared at the horizon. Now I don't know what to think. I married a man I barely knew, and it seems I knew even less about him than I thought. Ike's arm tightened slightly around her waist, a gesture of comfort rather than restraint. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. The warmth in his voice brought unexpected tears to Willow's eyes. She blinked them away, grateful that he couldn't see her face. Thank you, she whispered. They arrived back at the ranch in the late afternoon. After caring for his horse, Ike showed Willow where she could wash up and change into one of her new dresses. The simple blue calico was a far cry from the elaborate wedding gown she had worn just 2 days ago, but it was comfortable and practical. As evening approached, they worked together to prepare a meal Willow insisted on helping, unwilling to be merely a guest in his home. Ike proved to be a decent cook, though he admitted that his skills were limited to the basics. Sarah was the one with the talent in the kitchen, he explained as they sat down to eat. I've been surviving on beans and bacon since she left. Well, I'm no expert, but I can manage more than beans and bacon, Willow said with a small smile. Perhaps I can contribute in that way while I'm here. Ike returned her smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'd like that. After dinner, they sat by the fire, the night having brought a chill to the air despite the warmth of the day. Ike pulled out a deck of cards, and they played a few hands of rummy. the simple game helping to distract them both from the uncertainty of their situation. "Tell me about your life before all this," Ike said as he shuffled the cards for another round. "You mentioned your father was in business with Montgomery." Willow nodded, watching his hands as they deftly manipulated the cards. "Papa was always looking for the next big opportunity. He invested in railroads, mines, cattle, anything that promised a good return. Sometimes it paid off, sometimes it didn't," she sighed. "The last few years were hard. He kept taking bigger risks, trying to recoup earlier losses. When he died, I discovered that he had mortgaged everything we owned, even our home in St. Louis." "And Montgomery offered a way out," Ike said, dealing the cards. "Yes," Willow confirmed, picking up her hand. "He came to the funeral. I had only met him once before at a dinner party Papa hosted the previous year. He was charming, attentive. When he proposed his arrangement, it seemed like the answer to my prayers." She arranged her cards thoughtfully. "It wasn't until we were on the Stagecoach yesterday that I began to have doubts." "What kind of doubts?" Ike asked, discarding a card. Willow hesitated, then said, "He was different once we were married, colder, more proprietary, as if I were another acquisition, like a piece of land or a herd of cattle." She drew a card from the deck. "I told myself it was just nerves, that we would grow to know each other better in time." But there was a moment, just before the Stagecoach was attacked, when he was talking about his ranch and his plans for expansion. There was something in his eyes that frightened me. Ike watched her, his expression unreadable. "Ambition can be a dangerous thing when it's not tempered with compassion." "Yes," Willow agreed softly. "I think that's it exactly." She laid down her cards. "I believe that's a run." Ike looked down at her cards, then back at her face. "So it is," he acknowledged. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Montgomery." The use of her married name sent an unexpected pang through Willow. "Please," she said, "call me Willow. Mrs. Montgomery feels strange to me still." Ike nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Willow it is." They played a few more hands before fatigue began to overtake Willow. Ike noticed her stifling a yawn and immediately began gathering the cards. "You should rest," he said. "It's been a long day." Willow didn't argue, her body aching with the accumulated stress and physical strain of the past 2 days. Ike showed her to his sister's former room, a small but comfortable space with a narrow bed and a chest of drawers. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," he said, lingering at the doorway. "If you need anything, I'm just across the hall." "Thank you," Willow said, meeting his gaze. "For everything." Ike nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good night, Willow." "Good night, Ike." As she prepared for bed, Willow found herself thinking not of her missing husband, but of the quiet, steady man who had saved her life. She pushed the thoughts away, uncomfortable with the direction they were taking. William was in danger, possibly dead. It was wrong to be thinking of another man, especially one she had just met. Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it was Ike's face that filled her mind, his gentle strength a balm to her troubled soul. The next few days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. In the mornings, Ike would see to his ranch chores while Willow prepared breakfast. They would eat together, then Ike would ride into town to check with Sheriff Adams for any news, leaving Willow to attend to household tasks or rest. In the afternoons, Ike would work around the ranch, sometimes with Willow's help, teaching her about the daily operations of a cattle ranch. Evenings were spent in quiet conversation or playing cards by the fire. On the 4th day, Ike returned from town with a grim expression that told Willow he had news before he even spoke. "They found the Stagecoach driver," he said as he removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door. "Alive, but badly beaten. He was dumped on the outskirts of Silver Creek, about 30 miles east of here." Willow's heart raced. "And the others, William?" Ike shook his head. "No sign of them. The driver was barely conscious when they found him. The doctor there thinks he'll recover, but it'll be a few days before he's able to tell us anything useful." He crossed to where she stood by the stove, where she had been preparing a stew for dinner. "Adams sent telegrams to all the towns within 100 miles. If Reed and his gang are spotted, we'll know." Willow nodded, trying to process this information. So we wait, she said, turning back to her cooking to hide the tumult of emotions on her face. Ike placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We wait, he agreed, but we don't give up hope. The touch of his hand sent warmth through her, and Willow found herself leaning into it slightly before catching herself and straightening. Dinner will be ready soon, she said, keeping her voice steady. Ike's hand dropped away and he moved to wash up. It smells delicious, he said, his tone deliberately light. Better than anything I've managed to cook for myself in months. The attempt at normalcy was kind and Willow appreciated it. They ate dinner together as usual, though the conversation was more subdued than it had been in previous days. After cleaning up, they moved to their usual places by the fire, but instead of cards, Ike pulled out a book. I thought you might like something different tonight, he said, offering it to her. It's not much, but Sarah left a few of her books behind when she moved. Willow took the book, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. Wuthering Heights, she read aloud. I've never read it. Sarah loved it, Ike said. She used to read passages aloud to me sometimes, though I confess I didn't always follow the story. Too many feelings for a simple cowboy like me. His smile was self-deprecating. I doubt you're as simple as you pretend to be, Willow said, returning his smile. Thank you for thinking of this. It will be a welcome distraction. Ike settled into his chair with a piece of tack that needed mending, and Willow opened the book. Soon, she was lost in the wild, passionate world of the Moors, occasionally reading a particularly striking passage aloud. Ike would look up from his work, listening intently, his eyes on her face rather than his hands. It was the most peaceful evening they had spent together, despite the day's troubling news. When Willow finally closed the book, realizing how late it had grown, she found Ike watching her with a soft expression that made her heart flutter. You have a beautiful reading voice, he said quietly. Willow felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Thank you. My mother taught me to read aloud. She said it was an essential skill for a young lady. Your mother was a wise woman, Ike said, setting aside his mending. We should turn in. Tomorrow's likely to be another long day. As they prepared for bed, Willow found herself lingering in the doorway of her room, watching as Ike moved about, banking the fire for the night. There was something so reassuring about his presence, so steady and dependable. In just a few days, he had become a constant in her suddenly uncertain life. Ike, she called softly. He looked up, his expression questioning. Thank you, she said. Not just for the book, but for everything, for making me feel safe when everything else feels so unpredictable. Ike crossed to her, stopping a respectful distance away. You don't need to thank me, Willow. I'm just glad I can help. Their eyes met and held for a long moment, and Willow felt something shift between them, a subtle change in the air that made her breath catch. Then Ike stepped back, breaking the spell. Good night, Willow, he said, his voice a bit rougher than usual. Good night, Ike, she replied, retreating into her room and closing the door. That night her dreams were troubled, filled with faceless bandits and the sound of gunfire. She woke several times, each time reminding herself that she was safe, that Ike was just across the hall. The thought of him brought both comfort and confusion. What was happening to her? How could she be developing feelings for a man she had known for less than a week, while her husband was missing, possibly dead? Morning came too quickly, the sunlight streaming through the small window beside her bed. Willow rose, washed, and dressed in one of her new dresses, a simple brown calico that was practical for ranch life. When she emerged from her room, she found Ike already up and brewing coffee. Morning, he greeted her, his voice warm. Sleep well. Well enough, she answered, not wanting to worry him with her troubled dreams. You, Ike shrugged. Same as usual. He poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her. I need to check on a heifer that's about to calve this morning. Would you like to come with me? The fresh air might do you good. Willow nodded, grateful for the distraction. I'd like that. After a quick breakfast, they walked together to the small barn where Ike kept his more vulnerable animals. Inside, a young cow was lying in a stall of fresh straw, her sides heaving. Won't be long now, Ike said, kneeling beside the animal and checking her condition. First calf is always the hardest, but she's strong, she'll do fine. Willow watched as he gently examined the heifer, his hands sure and gentle. There was a tenderness in his interactions with the animals that moved her. This was a man who cared deeply, who approached the world with compassion rather than the cold calculation she had glimpsed in William. They spent the morning together in the barn, Ike explaining the calving process to Willow as they waited. When the moment finally came, Willow found herself kneeling beside Ike in the straw, watching in awe as new life entered the world. "It's a miracle," she whispered as the calf took its first shaky breaths. Ike glanced at her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Every time," he agreed. They stayed to ensure that mother and calf were bonding properly, then returned to the house to clean up before Ike made his daily trip to town. As he prepared to leave, Willow found herself reluctant to see him go. "Be careful," she said, standing in the doorway as he mounted his horse. "Always am," he replied with a reassuring smile. "I'll be back before sundown." Willow watched him ride away, a strange emptiness settling over her as his figure disappeared down the trail. The house felt too quiet without him, and she busied herself with chores to fill the silence. She baked bread, swept the floors, and even ventured out to check on the new calf and its mother, finding comfort in the simple routines of ranch life. It was late afternoon when she heard the sound of hooves approaching. Relieved, she went to the door, expecting to see Ike returning. Instead, 3 riders were approaching strangers, their faces hard and unfamiliar. Fear gripped her as she recognized the lead rider, the man with the scar across his right eye. Tucker Reed. Willow slammed the door shut and ran to where Ike kept his rifle above the fireplace. Her hands trembled as she took it down, checking to see if it was loaded as Ike had shown her during their time together. It was. The sound of boots on the porch sent a fresh wave of terror through her. She positioned herself by the window, the rifle ready, as the door burst open. Reed entered first, his scarred face twisting into a smile when he saw her. "Mrs. Montgomery," he drawled, "how nice to see you again." "Stay back," Willow warned, raising the rifle. "The sheriff knows about you, he's looking for you." Reed chuckled, seemingly unconcerned by the weapon pointed at him. "I'm counting on it, madam. That's why we're here. We need to move on, and you're coming with us." "Where's my husband?" Willow demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Reed's smile widened, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Oh, he's waiting for you, madam, very eager to see his bride again." "You're lying," Willow said, her finger tightening on the trigger. "If you take another step, I'll shoot." Reed gestured to the men behind him, who spread out, flanking her. "You might get one of us, madam, but not all of us. And I don't think you want to find out what happens if you try." Willow's mind raced. She needed to stall them to give Ike time to return. "Why did you leave me behind before? Why come back for me now?" Reed's expression hardened. "That was a mistake, one I'm here to correct." William was most upset when he learned we'd left his precious bride behind. "So he is alive?" Willow asked, hope and dread mingling in her heart. "For now," Reed said cryptically. "Now put down the rifle, madam. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Willow hesitated, weighing her options. She could shoot Reed, but as he said, the other men would overpower her. And if William truly was alive, going with them might be her only chance to find him. Slowly, she lowered the rifle. Reed nodded to his men, who moved forward to seize her. One of them took the rifle while the other grabbed her arms, pinning them behind her back. "Wise choice, Mrs. Montgomery," Reed said, stepping closer. "Your husband will be pleased." "Where are you taking me?" Willow asked as they dragged her toward the door. "To a place where no one will think to look for us," Reed replied. "A ghost town up in the mountains, perfect for our purposes." "And what purposes are those?" Willow demanded. Reed's smile was cold. "Justice, madam, long overdue justice." They forced her onto a horse, tying her wrists to the saddle horn. As they prepared to ride out, the sound of another horse approaching made them all tense. "Company," one of the men growled, drawing his pistol. Reed cursed. "Take her and go," he ordered the man who had bound Willow. "I'll deal with this." The man nodded, grabbing the reins of Willow's horse and kicking his own into motion. They galloped away from the ranch, Willow twisting in the saddle to look back. The last thing she saw before they rounded a bend in the trail was Ike riding into the yard, unaware of the ambush awaiting him. "Ike!" she screamed, but but the wind carried her voice away. They rode hard for hours, following trails that grew increasingly steep and narrow as they climbed into the mountains. Willow's captor said nothing, focused only on putting distance between them and the ranch. The sun was setting by the time they reached their destination, a cluster of decaying buildings nestled in a narrow valley. The ghost town was eerie in the fading light, windows gaping like empty eye sockets, doors hanging off hinges. The man guided their horses to what had once been the town's hotel, a two-story building that seemed marginally more intact than the others. "Inside," he grunted, cutting the ropes that bound her to the saddle and pulling her roughly from the horse. Willow stumbled as her feet hit the ground, her legs stiff from the long ride. The man caught her arm in a bruising grip and propelled her toward the building. Inside, the hotel lobby was dusty and dim, with broken furniture scattered about. A lantern burned on what had once been the front desk, casting long shadows across the room. And standing in those shadows was a figure Willow recognized immediately. "William," she gasped. William Montgomery stepped into the light, and Willow had to stifle a cry of shock. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled and dirty, but his good eye was cold and calculating as ever. "Willow," he said, his voice devoid of warmth, "I'm glad Reed found you. I was beginning to worry. What is happening?" Willow demanded, finding strength in her confusion and fear. "Why did those men attack the stagecoach? Why are we here?" William gestured to a chair. "Sit down, my dear. It's a long story, and I'm tired of standing." Willow remained where she was. "I want answers, William." "And you'll get them," he said, his tone hardening. "But you'll sit down first." The man who had brought her in pushed her toward the chair. Willow sat, her back straight, her eyes never leaving William's face. "Much better," William said, taking a seat across from her. "Now, where to begin?" "I suppose with Tucker Reed. We served together during the war. He was my lieutenant, a good soldier, loyal to a fault." He paused. "After the war, we came west together, started building what would become my ranch." "You were partners?" Willow asked, trying to understand. "Of a sort," William said dismissively. "Reed lacked vision. He wanted a simple life, a small spread, maybe a wife and children. I wanted more, much more." His face hardened. "When the opportunity came to expand, to acquire land that would make us truly wealthy, Reed balked." He had moral qualms about the methods required. "What methods?" Willow pressed. William's smile was cold. "Let's just say that not everyone was willing to sell. Some needed persuasion. Reed couldn't stomach it. We parted ways. I continued to build my empire while he fell in with a bad crowd, became the outlaw you met on the stagecoach." "So the attack was what? Revenge?" Willow asked. "In part," William acknowledged, "but also a warning. Reed has information that could be damaging to me. Information about certain business dealings that weren't entirely legal." He leaned forward. "That's where you come in, my dear." "Me?" Willow felt a chill run through her. "Your father wasn't just my business partner," William said. "He was my accomplice. The money he lost, the debts you inherited, they were the result of our schemes together. Schemes that went wrong." Willow stared at him, disbelieving. "My father would never. Your father was as ambitious as I am," William cut her off, "just less successful at it. When he died, he left behind evidence that could implicate both of us. Evidence I needed to ensure never came to light." Understanding dawned on Willow. "The marriage, it wasn't about clearing my debts, it was about gaining control of my father's papers." William smiled, a cold, satisfied expression. "Smart girl. Yes, as your husband, I had legal right to everything your father left behind, including a certain journal he kept detailing our activities." "I never saw any journal," Willow said, her mind racing. "No, you wouldn't have," William agreed, "because Reed stole it from your father's study the night he died." "My father didn't die naturally," Willow realized, horror washing over her. "You had him killed." William's expression didn't change. "Business is business, my dear. Your father had become a liability, but I still needed that journal. When I discovered Reed had it, I knew I had to act quickly." He gestured around them. "This little charade was meant to draw out Reed and his men to recover the journal before he could use it against me. The stagecoach robbery was planned. Willow asked, pieces falling into place. You arranged it, of course, William said. Though Reed deviated from the plan by leaving you behind, that wasn't supposed to happen, and the other passengers, the driver, Willow demanded. William shrugged. Collateral damage. The driver escaped, unfortunately. The others are no longer a concern. The casual way he spoke of murder made Willow's blood run cold. You're a monster, she whispered. I'm a businessman, William corrected her. And you, my dear, are still my wife. Which means you'll do exactly as I say or suffer the consequences. And what is it you want me to do? Willow asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. For now, wait, William said. Reed will be joining us soon, hopefully with your cowboy friend in tow. Then we'll negotiate the return of the journal. Ike, Willow breathed. What have you done to him? William's eyes narrowed. Ike, is it? You seem quite concerned about a man you've known for what, a few days? He leaned forward. Have you forgotten your marriage vows so quickly, Willow? You speak of vows, Willow said, anger overcoming her fear. You married me under false pretenses. You had my father killed. You arranged for men to die to cover your crimes. Your vows mean nothing. William moved so quickly that Willow had no time to react. His hand connected with her cheek in a stinging slap that sent her reeling. You will remember your place, he hissed. You are my wife, my property. You will obey me or you will regret it. Willow touched her cheek, tears springing to her eyes more from shock than pain. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that if she remained with this man, she would not survive. Take her upstairs, William ordered the outlaw who stood silently watching. Lock her in one of the rooms. Make sure she can't escape. The man grabbed Willow's arm, hauling her to her feet. As he dragged her toward the stairs, the sound of horses outside made them all pause. That'll be Reed, William said, straightening his disheveled clothing. Right on time. The front door opened, and Tucker Reed entered, pushing a bound and bloodied Ike before him. Willow's heart clenched at the sight of him, but she felt a surge of relief that he was alive. Look who I found snooping around your ranch, Montgomery, Reed said, shoving Ike to his knees. Seems your bride made a friend while you were away. William's cold gaze shifted from Ike to Willow, noting the recognition and concern in her eyes. So I see, he said softly. How touching. William, please, Willow began, but he cut her off with a gesture. Take her upstairs, he repeated to the outlaw. I'll deal with our guest. As the man pulled her toward the stairs, Willow locked eyes with Ike. Despite his injuries, his gaze was clear and steady, conveying a silent message of reassurance. We'll find a way out of this, his eyes seemed to say. Willow clung to that promise as she was forced up the rickety stairs and into a dusty room at the end of the hall. The door slammed behind her, and she heard the key turn in the lock. Alone in the dim room, with only a sliver of moonlight filtering through the dirty window, Willow sank onto the ancient bed and let the tears come, but she didn't cry for long. William's revelation about her father, his casual admission of murder, and the danger Ike now faced because of her, all of it crystallized into a determination she hadn't known she possessed. She would not be a victim. She would not be William Montgomery's property. She would find a way to save herself and Ike, and to bring William to justice for her father's death. Wiping away her tears, Willow rose and began to explore her prison, searching for any means of escape. The room was small and sparsely furnished, just the bed, a washstand with a cracked basin, and a wardrobe that leaned precariously against the wall. The window was small but might be large enough for her to squeeze through if she could open it. She tried, but years of disuse had sealed it shut. Looking around for something to pry it open, Willow's attention was drawn to voices drifting up from below. Moving to the door, she pressed her ear against it, straining to hear. The journal, Reed, William was saying, his voice tight with controlled anger. That's all I want. Give it to me and you can have the money and go your way. And why should I trust you? Reed's voice was contemptuous. You've betrayed everyone who ever trusted you, your business partners, your men during the war, even your own father-in-law. Because you have no choice, William replied. You're wanted in 3 territories. The money I'm offering would let you start fresh somewhere far from here, Mexico perhaps, or further south. There was a long pause, and then Reed spoke again, his voice lower but still audible. And what about them, your wife and her cowboy? They're my concern, not yours, William said coldly. You're going to kill them, Reed stated, not a question but a certainty. As I said, not your concern, William repeated. Do we have a deal? Another pause, longer this time. Willow held her breath, her heart pounding. No, Reed finally said. No deal. I may be an outlaw, Montgomery, but I still have a code. I won't be party to murder. Not again. The sound of a gunshot made Willow jump back from the door, a scream caught in her throat. Frantic, she looked around the room again, desperation lending her clarity. The wardrobe, if she could move it in front of the door, it might buy her some time. She pushed against it, but it was heavier than it looked. Gritting her teeth, she put her shoulder into it, feeling it shift slightly. Again she pushed, and again, each effort moving it a few inches across the floor. Below, chaos had erupted. More gunshots echoed through the old building, along with shouts and the sound of breaking furniture. Willow pushed harder, finally managing to position the wardrobe in front of the door just as footsteps pounded up the stairs. Willow. Ike's voice called from the hallway. Willow, are you in there? Ike, she cried, relief flooding through her. I'm here, the door's locked, and I've pushed a wardrobe in front of it. Stand back, he instructed. I'm going to break it down. Willow moved to the far corner of the room as the door shuddered under the impact of Ike's shoulder. Once, twice, and on the third try, the aged wood splintered around the lock. The door swung inward, stopped by the wardrobe. Help me move this, Willow said, pushing against the heavy piece of furniture. Ike squeezed through the narrow opening and added his strength to hers. Together, they pushed the wardrobe aside enough for them both to exit into the hallway. What happened? Willow asked, taking in Ike's appearance. His face was bruised and there was blood on his shirt, but he was moving well enough. Reed had a change of heart, Ike explained quickly. He decided he couldn't let Montgomery kill us. When Montgomery shot him, Reed's men turned on Montgomery. It's chaos down there. He took her hand. We need to go now. There's a back staircase at the end of the hall. They moved quickly, keeping low as more gunshots sounded from below. The back stairs were narrow and steep, leading down to what had once been the hotel kitchen. Ike led the way, his gun drawn, checking each corner before signaling Willow to follow. They had almost reached the back door when a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. William Montgomery, his fine clothes now stained with blood, a revolver in his hand, going somewhere. He asked, his voice eerily calm, "With my wife," Ike pushed Willow behind him, his own gun trained on William. "It's over, Montgomery, let us pass." William laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "Over? I don't think so. Reed is dead, his men will be dealt with, and you." His eyes narrowed. "You're just a complication that needs to be eliminated." "William, please," Willow said, stepping out from behind Ike. "Enough people have died. Let us go. I won't say anything about what you've done. I just want to be free." "Free?" William's face contorted with rage. "You're my wife. You belong to me, and if I can't have you, no one will." He raised his gun, aiming at Willow. Ike moved faster than she thought possible, shoving her aside as he fired. William's gun discharged simultaneously, the bullet splintering the doorframe where Willow had been standing a moment before. William staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as he looked down at the spreading stain on his chest. Then he collapsed, his gun clattering to the floor. Ike was at Willow's side in an instant. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. Willow shook her head, too shocked to speak. She stared at William's fallen form, unable to fully comprehend that the man she had married less than a week ago was now dead. "We need to go," Ike said gently, taking her hand. "There are still Reed's men to deal with, and they might not all share his sudden attack of conscience." Willow nodded, allowing him to lead her through the back door and into the night. 2 horses were tethered at a hitching post near the kitchen entrance, Ike's own mount and one of the outlaw's horses. "Can you ride?" Ike asked as he quickly checked the horse's tack. "Yes," Willow said, finding her voice again. "I can ride." Ike helped her mount, then swung up onto his own horse. "Stay close to me," he instructed. "We'll head back to town to Sheriff Adams. He needs to know what happened here." They rode away from the ghost town, the sound of gunfire still echoing behind them. The night was clear, the moon providing enough light to navigate the narrow trail down the mountain. Willow kept pace with Ike, her mind racing as the events of the day replayed in her thoughts. Her father's murder, William's betrayal, Reed's unexpected redemption, and now William's death, it was almost too much to process. Yet through it all, one constant remained: Ike. He had come for her, risking his life to save her from a man who had seen her as nothing more than a possession. As they reached the base of the mountain and the trail widened, allowing them to ride side by side, Willow glanced at Ike's profile, silvered in the moonlight. He must have felt her gaze, for he turned to her, concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. Willow considered the question. Was she all right? She had lost her father, discovered the truth about his death, been kidnapped, and witnessed her husband's death all within the span of a week. By any reasonable measure, she should be shattered. Yet here she was, riding through the night with a man she barely knew but trusted completely. "I will be," she answered honestly. "Thanks to you." Ike's expression softened. "You're stronger than you know, Willow. You saved yourself as much as I saved you." The simple faith in his words warmed her more than any elaborate compliment could have. They rode on in companionable silence, the rhythm of their horses' hooves a soothing counterpoint to the tumult of the day. It was near dawn when they reached Cottonwood Junction, the town just beginning to stir as the first light of day touched the eastern horizon. They rode directly to the sheriff's office, where Sheriff Adams, alerted by their arrival, met them at the door. "Owens, Mrs. Montgomery," he exclaimed, taking in their disheveled appearance. "What in God's name happened to you two?" Over the next hour, they related the events at the ghost town, William's confession, Reed's change of heart, the gunfight that had erupted, and William's death. Adams listened gravely, making notes and occasionally asking for clarification. "So Montgomery was behind it all," he said when they had finished. "Including the murder of your father, Mrs. Montgomery. I'm sorry." Willow nodded, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. Adams rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I'll send a posse up to the ghost town to sort out the mess there. As for you two," he looked from Willow to Ike, "you've been through hell. Get some rest. We can talk more later." Ike placed a gentle hand on Willow's shoulder. "You can stay at the hotel for now," he suggested. "It's more proper than returning to my ranch under the circumstances." Willow looked up at him, suddenly afraid that he was pulling away from her. "And where will you be?" "Close by," he assured her. "I need to see to some business in town, but I won't leave you alone, not after all this." Adams cleared his throat. "Actually, Owens, I'd feel better if you stayed at the hotel too, in case any of Reed's men come looking for revenge. Separate rooms, of course," he added hastily, for propriety's sake. Relief washed over Willow. She wasn't ready to be separated from Ike, not when he had become her anchor in the storm of the past week. The hotel was a modest two-story building on the main street. The proprietor, Mrs. Wilson, was a kind-faced woman who took one look at Willow and Ike and immediately began fussing over them. "You poor dears," she clucked, showing them to adjacent rooms on the second floor. "Caught in that awful business with the stagecoach. The whole town's been talking about it. You must be exhausted." She insisted on bringing up hot water for washing, fresh towels, and a tray of food. "Eat, then rest," she instructed. "Dr. Palmer is just across the street if you need him." When she had gone, Ike and Willow stood in the hallway between their rooms, suddenly awkward in the aftermath of their shared ordeal. "Will you be all right?" Ike asked, his voice gentle. Willow nodded, then hesitated. "Ike, I thank you for everything." He smiled, the expression lighting his tired face. "Get some rest, Willow. We can talk more later." She nodded again, then impulsively reached up and kissed his cheek before retreating into her room. The last thing she saw before closing the door was the surprised look on his face, followed by a slow, wondering smile. Alone in her room, Willow used the hot water to wash away the dust and grime of the past day. She changed into a clean nightgown provided by Mrs. Wilson, then sat on the edge of the bed, her mind too full for sleep despite her exhaustion. She was a widow now, she realized. A widow who had never truly been a wife. The irony of it struck her, and for a moment she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. William had married her under false pretenses, had been responsible for her father's death, and had planned to kill her when she no longer served his purposes. Yet society would expect her to mourn him, to wear black and observe a period of grief for a man who had brought her nothing but pain. But beyond the confines of this small frontier town, who would know or care what she did? Her life in St. Louis was over the debts, the scandal of her father's death, the hasty marriage to William. She had no family left, no home to return to. What she did have was a chance to start fresh, to build a new life on her own terms. And perhaps, she thought as she finally lay down and closed her eyes, not entirely on her own. Willow slept deeply, her body and mind demanding rest after the trauma of the past days. When she woke, the sun was high in the sky, suggesting it was well past noon. She dressed in the clean clothes Mrs. Wilson had provided, a simple but well-made blue dress that fit her reasonably well, and ventured downstairs. The hotel's small dining room was empty save for Ike, who sat at a corner table nursing a cup of coffee. He stood as she entered, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "Feeling better?" he asked as she joined him. Willow nodded. "Much, though I suspect I'll be processing everything that happened for quite some time." Ike signaled to Mrs. Wilson, who promptly brought coffee and a plate of food for Willow. "Sheriff Adams came by while you were sleeping," he said once they were alone again. His posse found Reed and Montgomery both dead at the ghost town, along with 2 of Reed's men. The others had fled. "And the stagecoach driver?" Willow asked. "Is he recovering?" "Yes," Ike confirmed. "He's well enough to travel now. Adams telegraphed his statement to the territorial marshal. It corroborates our account of what happened." Willow sipped her coffee, considering this information. "So it's over," she said softly. "In a manner of speaking," Ike agreed. "There's still the matter of Montgomery's estate. As his widow, you may have legal claims to consider." Willow set down her cup, her appetite suddenly diminished. "I want nothing from him," she said firmly. "Nothing that was built on deception and murder." "I understand," Ike said gently, "but there may be legitimate assets, things that were acquired honestly, and there might be others with claims against the estate, people Montgomery cheated or harmed who deserve restitution." Willow hadn't considered that aspect. "You're right, of course. I should speak with a lawyer, I suppose." "There's a good one in Cedar City," Ike suggested. "Adams knows him. He can arrange an introduction." They fell silent as Willow ate, each lost in their own thoughts. The dining room remained empty save for them, the quiet punctuated only by the occasional sounds from the kitchen where Mrs. Wilson was preparing for the evening meal. "What will you do now?" Ike finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. Willow looked up, meeting his gaze. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have no home to return to, no family waiting for me. For the first time in my life, I'm truly on my own." "You're not alone," Ike said quietly, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "Not unless you want to be." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Willow turned her hand over, her fingers intertwining with his. "I don't want to be alone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to rush into another situation without fully understanding what I'm committing to, either." Ike nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm not William Montgomery," he said. "I don't want to possess you or control you. I just want the chance to know you better, to see if what I've felt growing between us this past week could become something more." Willow smiled, relief and warmth spreading through her. "I'd like that," she said, "to take the time to know each other properly." Ike returned her smile, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "Then that's what we'll do, one day at a time." The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. With Sheriff Adams's help, Willow secured legal counsel and began the process of settling William's estate. The lawyer from Cedar City, Mr. Harrington, proved to be both knowledgeable and compassionate, guiding her through the complexities of her situation. William's fortune, it turned out, was largely built on fraud and theft, but there were legitimate assets as well: land, cattle, and investments that had been acquired legally. Willow insisted that any ill-gotten gains be returned to their rightful owners where possible. or donated to worthy causes where the original owners couldn't be identified. This decision earned her the respect of many in the community, who had known or suspected William's corrupt nature but had been powerless against his influence. It also simplified the estate considerably, leaving her with a modest but comfortable inheritance that would allow her to support herself independently. Throughout this time, Ike remained a constant presence in her life. He had returned to his ranch but rode into town almost daily, often staying at the hotel overnight before returning home the next day. They dined together, walked together, and talked for hours, learning each other's histories, hopes, and dreams. Ike told her about his childhood in Ohio, his service in the Union Army during the war, and his decision to come west afterward, seeking a fresh start. He spoke of his sister Sarah and her husband in California, of his hopes to expand his small ranch one day, and of the loneliness he had felt before Willow had come into his life. In turn, Willow shared stories of her upbringing in St. Louis, her mother's early death, and her close relationship with her father. She spoke of her love of books, her secret desire to write stories of her own someday, and her growing certainty that fate had intervened when Ike had found her tied to that stagecoach wheel. As summer turned to fall, their feelings for each other deepened. Ike was patient, never pushing for more than Willow was ready to give, respecting her need to fully process all that had happened and to establish her independence before considering another marriage. They were sitting on the hotel's front porch one evening in early October, watching as the setting sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, when Ike brought up a subject they had been circling for weeks. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice casual though his expression was earnest. "The Wilsons are looking to sell the hotel. They want to move to California to be closer to their daughter." Willow nodded. "Mrs. Wilson mentioned it to me. They've owned it for 15 years, she said. It's hard for them to leave, but they miss their family." "I was thinking it might be a good investment," Ike continued. "The town is growing. The railroad will reach here within 2 years, according to the latest reports. A well-run hotel could be quite profitable." Willow turned to look at him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Isaac Owens, are you considering becoming a hotelier instead of a rancher?" He laughed, the sound warm in the cooling evening air. "Not exactly. I was thinking more of a partnership." He met her gaze steadily. "You mentioned once that you'd like to have a business of your own, something that was truly yours. The hotel could be that. I could provide the capital from the sale of some of my cattle, and you could manage the day-to-day operations." Willow was speechless for a moment, touched by his thoughtfulness. "A business partnership?" she finally asked, her tone light though her heart was racing. Ike's smile was gentle. "For starters," he said, "though I hope it might lead to a more personal partnership in time." He took her hand. "I love you, Willow. I think I have since the moment I cut you free from that stagecoach wheel, but I want you to be sure of your own mind and heart before we take that step." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes. "Oh, Ike," she whispered, "I love you too. I have for weeks now. I just wasn't sure if it was too soon, if I was rushing into something because of all that happened." "And now?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "Now I'm sure," she said, squeezing his hand. "I love you and I want a future with you. Whether that includes owning this hotel or not, I don't really care, as long as we're together." Ike's face broke into a radiant smile. "Then marry me, Willow. Be my wife, my partner in all things." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms then, kissing her with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "When?" Ike asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Soon," Willow replied. "I don't want to wait long, but I'd like to write to your sister first, invite her and her husband to the wedding. They're your family, and family should be present for such occasions." Ike nodded, touched by her consideration. "Sarah would like that, and she would love you, I know it." They were married 6 weeks later, on a crisp November day with the mountains dusted with the first snow of the season. The ceremony was held in the small church in Cottonwood Junction, with half the town in attendance. Sarah and Daniel Wilson had made the journey from California, arriving just 2 days before the wedding. Sarah, a lively woman with Ike's dark hair and kind eyes, had taken to Willow immediately, and the two had formed a quick bond. Sheriff Adams gave the bride away, and Mrs. Wilson, tearful but beaming, had helped Willow prepare for the ceremony. The dress was simple but elegant, a soft ivory rather than traditional white, which seemed fitting for a woman embarking on her second marriage under such unusual circumstances. As Willow walked down the aisle toward Ike, she felt none of the uncertainty or resignation that had marked her first wedding. Instead, her heart was full of joy and anticipation for the life they would build together. The reception was held at the hotel now officially owned by the newlyweds, the sale having been completed the week before. Mrs. Wilson had outdone herself with the preparations, and the dining room overflowed with food, flowers, and well-wishers. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Ike found Willow standing by the window in what was now their private suite on the hotel's second floor. She was looking out at the town, at the lights glowing in windows and the stars shining overhead. Happy. He asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. Willow leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his presence. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied. "If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would find love and happiness in this small frontier town, I would have thought them mad." "Life has a way of surprising us," Ike said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes in terrible ways, but sometimes in wonderful ones too." Willow turned in his arms to face him, her eyes shining with love and a touch of mischief. "And which kind of surprise am I, Mr. Owens?" "The very best kind, Mrs. Owens," he replied, bending to capture her lips with his. "The kind that makes all the others worthwhile." As they embraced in the soft lamplight, the sounds of the town gradually quieting around them, Willow knew that her journey had brought her exactly where she was meant to be. From the terror of being bound to that stagecoach wheel to the joy of being bound by love to the man who had saved her, her path had been unexpected but ultimately blessed. And as Ike led her to their bed, his touch gentle yet passionate, Willow surrendered to the knowledge that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from the most harrowing circumstances. Their love story had started with a rescue, but it would continue as a partnership of equals, built on trust, respect, and a devotion that had been forged in the crucible of danger and emerged stronger for the trial. The years that followed were kind to Ike and Willow Owens. The hotel thrived under their management, becoming known throughout the territory for its comfort and hospitality. When the railroad arrived in 1874, business boomed, and they were able to add a new wing to accommodate the increased traffic. Ike maintained his ranch as well, hiring a capable foreman to oversee the day-to-day operations while he divided his time between the two enterprises. The combination of steady income from both ventures allowed them to live comfortably and to help others in the community when needed. Their first child, a daughter they named Alina after Willow's mother, was born in the spring of 1873. She was followed 2 years later by a son, James, named for Ike's father. Sarah and Daniel Wilson visited from California whenever they could, bringing their own children to play with their cousins. The ghost town in the mountains where William Montgomery had met his end was eventually reclaimed by nature, the buildings collapsing under the weight of winter snows and summer storms. Few remembered the events that had transpired there, and those who did spoke of them rarely. Willow found healing in the passage of time, in the love of her husband and children, and in the fulfillment of her own dreams. She began writing stories as she had once hoped to do, tales of the frontier that captured both its harshness and its beauty. Several were published in Eastern magazines, bringing her a modest fame that she found both surprising and gratifying. Ike took immense pride in his wife's accomplishments, encouraging her talent and making sure she had the time and space to pursue it alongside her other responsibilities. Their partnership in business and in life was a source of strength and joy for them both. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Ike surprised Willow with a gift, a small, leather-bound journal he had commissioned from a craftsman in Denver. The cover was embossed with her initials and a simple image of a willow tree. "For your stories," he said as she unwrapped it, her eyes widening with pleasure, "though none could be more remarkable than our own." Willow smiled, running her fingers over the soft leather. "Our story isn't over yet," she reminded him. "We're still writing it day by day. And may it be a long tale," Ike said, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm, "with many happy chapters still to come." That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Willow reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. Had she not been tied to that stagecoach wheel, had Ike not happened along that lonely trail, their paths might never have crossed. It was a sobering thought, but also a reminder of how precious their life together truly was. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" Ike murmured, his voice drowsy. "How fortunate I am," Willow replied, nestling closer to him. "How every hardship led me to you, and how I wouldn't change a moment of it if it meant we might not have found each other." Ike's arms tightened around her. "Nor would I," he agreed. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willow Owens, the very best thing." As they drifted off to sleep, secure in each other's embrace, the stars wheeled overhead and the world continued its ceaseless turning. But for Ike and Willow, time seemed to stand still in moments like these, moments of perfect contentment, of love fulfilled and promises kept. Their story, which had begun with an act of cruelty and an act of kindness, would continue for many years to come. There would be challenges and sorrows, as there are in any life, but also joy and laughter, love and friendship, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived in the company of one's true companion. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, they would sit together on the hotel's front porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, and marvel at the journey that had brought them to this place, this time, this love. A journey that had started when a bride was tied to a stagecoach wheel, and a cowboy cut the knots and placed her in his saddle, carrying her not just to safety, but to a future brighter than either of them could have imagined.